community, we are back. It is episode 4. We have gotten to episode 4 of Rock the Boat 868, the podcast. I'm Abeo.
And I'm Amanda.
And here we are getting ready to do this again with you guys. Gotta say thank you so much to all the folks who have become almost loyal listeners. Gil, we have loyal listeners.
We have fans. We have fans. In Trinidad and Tobago, the region, and even outside of the region too.
Yes. I mean, it might not be a very large amount of fans, but it's fans, and we definitely appreciate folks who've been showing love and who've been giving active feedback and even loving and constructive criticism. You know what I mean? In fact, I don't even need to be love and criticism. I don't even mind bitchy criticism either. Once it's coming from a place of wanting better, wanting more, wanting to interrogate further, I am absolutely cool with that. So
yeah, we definitely have a loyal base, and that's good because it's very easy to feel isolated in this struggle.
Yeah, so we appreciate that. I gotta say thank you so much to Kwame from last week. We had so much fun and we've gotten such great feedback, and we hope that all is well in his neck of the woods. Now, that said, we're going to get into it. Today we have a lot of things that we want to talk about. We're finally getting there. We had promised even from the first episode that eventually we would get to this juggernaut of a topic because that really is what it is. But some things have happened over the last week or two that really has forced us to face head on the beast that is colorism. All my light bright kin, I love you dearly. But we're gonna hurt some feelings today because we need to talk.
The light brights might be dimmed a little bit.
A little bit. You know, we need to talk. We have some gatekeeping issues that we need to address. We talking Adele. We talking Jess Krug. Is Krug your pronounce name? That's she.
That's part of the problem. Like
full
which
Jewish
name? Which black person?
Name Krug. Who named Krug? I do not know one single black person named Krug. You know? She says she's black Latina. That's not even a Latin name. Krug. Listen. Okay, you see the thing that's starting to get hot already. So we're talking about those two girls. And we're also talking about it within the context of the Caribbean versus the wider world on this particular issue. Because we in the Caribbean, I'm using the word we, but I realize that somehow I fall on the outside of this Venn diagram because I've been seeing how Caribbean folk have been interacting with, African Americans, Black British, etc., who deal with certain microaggressions because of the fact that they exist and live in spaces that have that majority-minority dynamic. So we're going to talk about the differences in terms of how we view colorism, appropriation versus appreciation, and all those kinds of things. We're going to get into that and get it out your system. Let's pause for a cause, take a quick break, and come back and chat about all those things because it's a lot. It's a mouthful today.
It's a lifeful.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a life.
It's a life
Yeah.
full. See why I like her? This is why I stick close to her. All right, stay close, guys. We're coming back. Amanda, you know what? I think I'm going to let you take the initial lead on this because this one for me, I'm not going to front, I am human. This has always been a topic for me that has been very, very close to my heart. It makes me sometimes emotional, and again, being in this particular packaging, living in this particular body as a black woman, you've been made to feel very aware of your emotions and the validity of your emotions, especially where this particular topic is concerned. I've been gaslit, I've been told I'm crazy, I've been called aggressive, I've been called lots of things, most of which, the majority of which, now roll off my back as an adult. But as a young woman coming up, particularly going to school in a space that was predominantly of another demographic, there were certain things that I had to come to face with and make peace with at a very, very early age. And I feel as though other young women, other children didn't necessarily have to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one that gets under my skin a little bit. And you do err on the side of, you know, being particularly rational and coming with those receipts. So I'm going to let you lead off on this one.
Well, the topic of colorism has a lot of deep complexity, because what it does is, apart from the racial stratification that is already a great problem, and on the basis of which systematic disenfranchisement of African people specifically lies, further to that, within Black communities, there's further stratification just based on tone of skin, with lighter tones being at the top of the pyramid and darker tones being at the bottom. And by being at the top and being at the bottom, I mean the amount of privileges that persons are privy to within communities. So persons at the top are treated better, received better, have more access to resources and people, places, things, just a generally better life than their counterparts of darker skin who have less privilege, less access. And our internalization of these things sometimes, not in all cases, but sometimes leads to very warped understandings of ourselves and our place in society, and definitely affects the ways in which we navigate the whole world. So
I couldn't have said it better. Like, you know, there was part of me saying maybe we should start off with, you know, a definition of what colorism is, but I think you, in essence, you defined it, because that is what it is. And as you say, that whole stratification of Blackness and the fact that we amplify certain voices, that we amplify and glorify and make space for certain voices when they come in a particular packaging.
Yes.
And these are historical legacies that we as a diaspora need to come to terms with. I think it goes all the way back to when we were brought in, and the kinds of divisions that were created by our colonial masters. You know, slave versus field versus who, and then of course, you know, that history of violence that was perpetrated against Black women by our colonial masters. So who was a octoroon, who, you know, that whole one-drop rule nonsense.
Colorism is a colonial construct.
Of course. And it still serves colonial constructs that still exist. And which is why I say it's like, I feel as though colorism is a gatekeeping issue within our community that we have to address, because it makes room for certain things, it leaves room for certain things to occur. That those ideas of consumption of Blackness when it is convenient, or the assuming certain phenotypes of Blackness, where you will have corporate who will dress someone in Blackness as opposed to amplifying the voices and the bodies that actually are Black, or can visually really identify as Black. I will never forget when I was studying in the UK 2 years ago and dealing with castings and whatnot, and there is a block where you tick off your race, etc. And or when castings come out and they're advertising for casting and they're looking for somebody racially ambiguous, that's the actual term that they use.
Yes.
Racially ambiguous. And I was confused the first time. Like, I felt real dim, because I was like, what does that mean? What does that even mean? You know what I mean? And it's a thing where it's almost too like how we use the broad term person of color
as opposed to Black.
Right. Because it makes proximity to whiteness feel more comfortable, it makes it feel more acceptable, it makes it feel more non-threatening, because that's really what it is. And Blackness has a certain level of threat attached to it. But anyway, that's the framing of this conversation that we're going to have. And the reason why I thought, you know what, maybe this is a week to get into it, is because over the last 2 weeks,
There's always something, you know. There's always something.
Adele. Hello
Never
on the
a
other
dull
side.
moment.
Hello on the other side. So, our girl Adele, and I do love Adele. I love Adele, and I know I've always been mindful of folks, particularly African Americans, who've always given her a little bit of a side eye because they felt as though some of her stylistic choices and qualities in terms of how she performs, it borrows heavily in terms of the aesthetic from styles and genres that are particularly associated with Blackness. So they've always given her a little bit of side eye, but I mean, she's had these awful breakups and life upheavals, and she makes amazing albums because of it, and we love her.
Yeah, she has relatable content.
Yes, and up to this point in time, she has been largely unproblematic. So Adele lost a whole lot of weight, and she looks absolutely fabulous, and I'm not here for anybody who wanted to disparage why she lost the weight, etc., etc. But girl has been feeling herself since she lost this weight. Feeling herself. So right about now, we're living in an era where carnivals all over the world have been cancelled, although it seems as though the folks in New York, Labor Day, didn't get a message that carnivals have been cancelled. Either that or they have the cure for COVID and they didn't tell everybody else, because to see it this weekend go on, you would have thought that there was no COVID-19 in New York for Labor Day. However, I digress. Notting Hill Carnival was actively cancelled, and but for some reason, in order to commemorate the moment, Adele showed up on Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook and various other social media platforms.
We also should note this was the first time we ever saw Adele in a carnival anywhere.
Anyway,
At all.
right? Rocking the saddest little carnival costume ever, bless her heart. And I took no issue with her little feathered backpack or even her Jamaican bikini top or whatever. That's cool. But I did pause at the Bantu Knots.
Yeah.
I took pause at the Bantu Knots. And here's why. Because, and like we were talking before we went live, before we started recording, where I was telling people crawling out the woodworks, twisting themselves into a pretzel to talk about, but yes, there are certain Celtic tribes that used to wear Bantu knots. You really think she's wearing the Bantu knots in this particular context to celebrate her Celtic history?
That's just an irrelevant argument, because when we talk about race, we talk about race in its modern context, race as it is redefined in modern times. We talk about race in terms of the history of Africans' enslavement in the Western world. So when people start talking about their Celtic history and the Norse gods
and all this kind of stuff.
So what's that show on TV? Vikings
and all them fellas and them. Just his mouth, right?
Admittedly, when I saw the picture of Adele, I didn't even recognize that it was Adele, you know. And yet, my first thought was, what is white woman doing with this hairstyle?
Thank you very much. My thing is, right? You have bone straight hair. Your hair is as straight as they come. Why are you wearing a very significantly African hairstyle, and two, what can be termed as a protective style? What is you protecting?
Not just African and a protective style, but a style that has been shunned and treated in the worst possible way.
This is exactly my point.
Called ugly, called unprofessional.
Thank you. But on her, all of a sudden, it's a celebration.
All of a sudden, it's a celebration.
Quite frankly, I just feel like I'm really, really tired of people wearing us as a costume. And this is where the conversations about appreciation versus appropriation popped up. Because when the picture arose, my first thought was, oh Adele, what in the appropriation is you doing out in these streets? But largely the Caribbean, the majority of the Caribbean response that we saw was such that, oh gosh, it's Carnival, she's celebrating, she's appreciating the culture.
Yeah.
And there ended up being an online sparring between Caribbean voices where we have a completely different understanding of race relations as it pertains to appropriation, that context, versus African Americans and even some Black Brits who got in on the argument as well because of the fact that it was Notting Hill Carnival, and their understanding of what it means to exist in a majority minority lived experience context with daily microaggressions where these kinds of things are concerned. And for me, it was about, sometimes I really wish Caribbean folks would just hush and listen.
And the thing about it is, I could understand in some ways, one of those ways being the fact that cultural exchanges in the Caribbean happen within a totally different context, with here being very plural society, multiple contributions from different ethnicities, whereas in other countries there might in fact be that binary. So when we contribute into these discussions, we have to keep the context in mind. The persons who were critiquing Adele were speaking of it within that binary perspective, white, black binary, within which all things African were considered below, beneath, and not welcome. That is the context within which. So it's almost irrelevant to bring the discussion about, oh, well, you know, we welcome all people. If you're talking from a Caribbean perspective, we understand it there, but in the context of Adele, it really loses steam.
Of course, and then there's also the context. This one really ground my gears, where people were saying, oh, right now, you know, the arts, you know, in a bad way, and we're looking to get mileage, we're getting mileage, she promoting Carnival, and I was just like,
Adele?
How is Adele promoting Carnival in this particular moment? And I think we sell ourselves short, you know.
We do.
Because we don't understand what it is we have and the power that we have, and that we don't need this one lone Caucasian woman with ridiculous Bantu knots in her hair.
Just imagine the depth of internalized racism
This
you have
is
to be
it.
in, that you would think that Adele, what's her last name? I never really knew.
I can't remember. She
Anyway,
has
Adele Adkins.
Mhm.
Have to save or promote your culture internationally.
This is it. That she single-handedly in she Jamaican bikini top.
And quite frankly, it refers to the white savior trope.
This is it. Oh, you see, and the thing is, I quietly observed that. I saw people falling over themselves to have this conversation on social media, and I said, this is an interesting dynamic. And I made the comment too publicly where I said, we in the Caribbean have led movements where it pertains to race relations and civil rights and whatnot. Historically, we have been leaders in the movement. But we were able to lead those movements, of course, bringing our Caribbean context with us, but taking the time to understand the context where those movements existed.
Yeah.
So when those conversations were happening online, I saw Caribbean people actively speaking over the voices of folks, telling them why it was a problem, why what was happening was problematic. Do we necessarily think adults woke up that morning and said, I'm going to be malicious? No, but there was a level of tone deafness attached to it, and the tone deafness came directly from a place of privilege, the place of privilege in which she exists. So sometimes we need to hush and listen.
And I'm glad you made that point, because this is not to say that people are not going to make mistakes. This is not to say that somebody isn't going to get up one day and do absolute rubbish. Mm-hmm. It is to say that in the aftermath of doing the rubbish, are you listening to the voices of the people who say they were hurt by your actions?
That's it. That's it. And for me, it also came back to this idea of diasporic unity.
Yeah.
And the idea that we need to amplify each other's voices in crucial moments. Mm-hmm. And what was truly interesting to me is not but a week after Lori Bell Adkins, or whatever she name is, bless her, hello on the other side, did her bare shites, bless her, in Bantu Knots. I'm wondering how her hairline is doing right now.
It's probably all tied up in Bantu Knots.
We saw the unveiling of Jessica Krug.
Well, this is a story for the
Horse.
ages. I think I'll be telling my grandchildren
Horse.
this story.
So for those of you who don't know, this is a Jewish woman who has been living in academic blackface.
Yeah.
Academic blackface.
A
And
Jewish woman who grew up in Kansas City.
thank you, Kansas. Click your heels together. She's like Dorothy from the fucking Wizard of Oz. Literally. Okay?
And I stress that to say this is not just a white woman. This is a woman who comes from like an epicenter of whiteness.
Mayonnaise. Like, she puts mayonnaise on her sandwiches. This is what I envision. That's what she grew up with. Those of you who have a problem with that, I'm sorry.
I like mayonnaise.
Really?
I do.
As opposed to good old butter?
I mean, it has its uses.
Really?
Yeah.
You like mustard too?
I do.
Oh, wow. Anyway.
I like raisins too.
In potato salad?
Not in potato salad, but it has its functions.
Because we was about
But
to.
anyway.
Anyway. This homegirl is a historian of politics, ideas, and cultural practices in, get this, Africa and the African diaspora.
She went deep.
She went deep. And she decided that her voice as an ally was not enough. That in order to cement herself in the black spaces that she sought to speak on, she needed to assume blackness. And in so doing, steal opportunities from actual black academics who may be saying the same thing or may be speaking from an even more informed place because, you know, they actually are black. You know what I mean? This woman has books, plural, one of which, Fugitive Modernities, Politics and Identities Outside the State of Kisama, Angola, and the Americas. Homegirl went deep. She decided that it wasn't okay to be Jess Krug from Kansas City, that she needed to be a black Latina woman.
You see, I was reading some of the statements of her fellow academics following the great reveal. And what was really sad is that a lot of them were saying that this was actually like really solid academic work, well researched, important in the genre. There was no reason for this woman to go into this full minstrelsy, and yet she did. And what was really problematic is academia remains a space that privileges white people.
That's right.
She would have get through it everything. But instead, she chose to occupy a space that was reserved for minorities and rightfully reserved for minorities because of how disenfranchised they are within the system.
Thank you.
That is equity. You go into that space and you steal resources. You steal opportunities that were put there for minorities. And then you come out at this time now to talk about it only because you were threatened.
That's right. She did, and this is the thing, homegirl did not reveal herself, shed the costume because she had some sort of great, you know, moral comeuppance, you know, like she had a moment. No, it's because two students said, listen, enough is enough, and threatened to reveal, and as a result, she went public. Now, this is my thing about this, because of the fact that we have our own issues with colorism, right? With understanding how colorism feeds into leaving room and space, it creates a gatekeeping issue. It leaves room for these things to happen. One, because we excuse and we turn a blind eye to the Adeles when they do that, or the Kylie Jenners, which one of them Kardashian and them, all of them, or the whole Kardashian family. You understand what I mean? We excuse or we look the other way, so to speak, or we just tolerate. And then, so one is, to me, the Kardashians is a superlative of what Adele would have done. And then superlative to the Kardashians, now you have something like what this Jess Krug woman would have done. Each one to me is a superlative of the other. It's like one little step up, one little step up. And by the time you get to Jess Krug, you are like completely shook and you can't understand how it happened. But in a lot of ways, we within the black diaspora, the African diaspora, have to take a hard look at ourselves and the fact that we have not dealt with our issues of colorism. And because of the fact, when particularly dark-skinned black women seek to gatekeep, and we call things out, as in particularly the voices that should be centered in the conversation as it pertains to colorism, those voices are spoken over. And we are told that we're imagining things, and that we have a chip on our shoulder, and it is all in our head, etc., etc. But in the meantime, folks are out here glorifying and amplifying the Jess Krugs of the world. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
When you have people who are worthy, who have the same level of ability to interrogate our lived experiences and to relay our narratives in our own voices that we don't give space because of the fact that they come in a particular packaging.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because one professor was saying that one great backlash to the academic community and to the Black community that this can cause is that it stabs right to the heart of identity politics, and that is, it exposes how much essentialism there is in identity politics. If somebody who is not the thing could so successfully embody a performance of it, then what exactly is the thing? You know? So it's sort of like, and it goes directly to the heart of identity politics, which is really terrible, especially in this time when you have people like Donald Trump.
I feel like when you say his name, you have to like spit on the floor or something.
I had a moment the other day, I have to tell you about it. So I wrote that Donald Trump was a grossly controversial president, and somebody had to pull me back and say, I feel that was an underestimation. I feel that's an understatement. Maybe you should go back to that or something else.
But we digress.
Yeah, so she has basically on her platform done exactly what Donald Trump has been doing single-handedly through this great reveal. She has shot to the heart of identity politics, and while it remains one of those great conversations that begs further discussion, we didn't expect that the further discussion would come in this way.
No. But listen, to be fair, this is the kind of year that we've been having,
Yeah.
Where, I mean, I'm not surprised that reveals of this nature would happen in a year like this, especially in terms of everything that's been going on with Black Lives Matter and the kind of uncomfortable conversations that we've been forced to have because of the civil unrest. Because let's face it, that's where we are right now in terms of what's happening in the US. It is full-fledged civil unrest. Let's not front. And it's going to get worse before the elections in November.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you put it within the context of 2020 and particularly Black Lives Matter, because one friend of mine, while we were discussing the same Jess Krug topic, asked the question, is it that she actively said that she was Black, or that people just assumed that she was Black because she was in the conversation?
Who's this friend?
And I had to tell them, no, it's not just that she was saying she was Black. Even this woman had a whole story.
She had a life. She created a life
story, which she even documents on the Medium, which is the platform on which she posted the reveal, stating the several incarnations of the Black identification. It first being a Northwestern Black identification, then being
North African,
then being Afro-American, and then finally a Caribbean Bronx identification.
Yeah, a Boricua, so to speak.
Further to that, there are even video documentations of her talking about her childhood in the Bronx and talking about witnessing police brutality. A whole story about her brother
active lying. Lying.
Listen.
Through your teeth. Lying. You know that old saying about hold on, let me make sure I get it in the right context, that a liar is a thief and a thief is a murderer.
Yes.
A liar is a thief, and that's what she did. She stole opportunities from Black academics.
Yes.
She stole narratives from Black people.
Yes.
And for me, in terms of being a murderer, in terms of being willing to look the other way, and this is also a woman who apparently she sowed a lot of divisiveness to within Black academic communities as well, which is where I feel like that whole potential to murder, so to say. I mean, we understand the whole Karen culture right now, the people who would be willing to actively put Black lives in danger.
Yeah.
And for me, in a lot of ways, that's what she was actively doing.
Yes.
That is actively what she was doing.
Yes.
So for me to bring it back home now to the Caribbean, in terms of our context of the gatekeeping that we need to do, and you know that there are a lot of people in Trinidad who actively are very uncomfortable saying that they are Black. You know what I mean? I'm not Black as a Trinidadian. When they actively fully bear the full phenotype of being Black, dark skin, kinky haired.
That argument didn't sound completely stupid.
And if y'all are listening to me right now, we love you a whole lot. Thank you for listening to Rock the Boat 868, but you sound dumb.
Yeah.
You sound dumb. Being Trinidadian is much, we have much to be proud of, all the culture and the richness that runs through our veins and all that good stuff. Yes, that cultural experience of what it means to be full-fledged Trinidad and Tobago. But being Trinidad and Tobago and identifying as Trinbagonian only factors in a lot of ways, it silences much of your rich history and culture and lived experience, because to be Trinbagonian is a nationality.
Yeah.
It does not speak to your
ethnic
heritage. That's right, exactly.
Speak to the history that brought you into this place. And one of the dismissals that could easily go to that position is the fact that Jess Krug would assume a black identification because she knows what it would do for her politically.
Thank you.
She knows what it would do for her politically. So,
and the thing is, in terms of what things do for you politically, I think one of the whole issues attached to colorism is this idea of respectability politics.
Yeah.
And that wanting proximity. So there are even folks who clearly bear dark skin aesthetics who you find, I'm just gonna say it, Fitzgerald. I'm just gonna say it, Fitzgerald. You know, who, I tell you, a dedication to a life of self-contempt is a hell of a thing, you know. Where he would have done what he did and felt justified in doing what he did. When he clicked post on that post, when he searched for the piper within him, and, you know, found none.
Yeah.
Yes? According to the...
Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
He has one life to live. One life to live, and he chooses time and again, because this is not the first time we've seen this type of behavior from Fitzgerald Hines. He chooses time and again to just steep himself in internalized racism.
This is it. This is it. And the fact that he would use because he uses his dreadlocks and he uses his appearance to, in some ways, justify what he does.
Yeah.
Look at me, I am the measure of what you could be and what you could achieve. And
I look just like you with my rasp.
You know?
I'm a pseudo-intellectual.
You understand? But at the same time, what you are doing is disenfranchising the voices and the lived experiences of a lot of people who are not the exception to the rule, which is what you were fortunate enough to be. And instead of using your platform to amplify those lived experiences and to make a way, so to speak, you choose to ridicule, because that's what that was, wasn't it? It was ridicule.
And what was really terrible about the Fitzgerald incident was just the timing, you know. It came so close to election 2020. Black people being told that they would eat grass, monkey ape, just being portrayed in the most disparaging ways. And then here comes Brother Fitzgerald Hines.
Mm-hmm. Girl, I sat with that for a really, really long time. I sat with it for a really long time. And there's a part of me that also understands why I think I could never say I understand why he is the way he is, because I don't know him personally. You know, I'm sure, and I know that he must also have a body of work that he has done good, etc., whatever. But I feel as though, because of living in the personhood in which he lives and probably having been received a certain way by society, the personhood that he has now assumed is to directly counteract that. You know what I mean? So, for instance, where it's like dark-skinned black women are always quicker to end up being labeled as aggressive, or there's a bitch, or let's think about like Fayan and how she's received being the wife of Bunji Garlin, and oh God, why she don't mind your business, and that is a man's wife. Who business you want she to mind? I don't understand. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that there aren't moments where people aren't problematic. She has problematic moments, etc.
She's allowed as a human being.
This
to
is
have
it.
Problematic moments.
But the way she's received in public, as opposed to maybe some of her other counterparts within the community, is markedly different, which probably directly speaks to the reason why she is the way she is. It's the armor that she has put on in order to navigate the space in which she exists. Yeah. It's the same thing with Fitzgerald Hines. This
I agree with you. That's
it's armor that he has put on.
Yeah.
You understand?
An immense amount of violence used to reprimand black women in public all the time.
And black, dark-skinned black men in particular, because they're seen as threatening, etc. You know, it's blackness in general, because of the way it is seen, black people over a period of time have had to find ways to assimilate. Some have done it less problematically than others. And then with that, I think that sums up some of the public interactions you will see in terms of the Fitzgerald Hines, maybe even in terms of what you might see some of our soca celebrities, like if we use it as the example, how she would navigate interacting with the public, etc., etc. It's armor, and it is armor that they have been forced to assume because of the fact that we as a society continue to move forward without coming to terms with so many of our colonial legacies.
So what do Fitzgerald Hines, Jessica Krug, and Adele have in common?
For me, it is in different ways assuming a personhood that is not theirs, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And whereas Adele may have done it in a more frivolous, less threatening way, Jessica Krug much more sinister, and Fitzgerald and elaborate. Fitzgerald in the opposite way, assuming proximity to privilege and whiteness, that regardless of how much he tries to do it, the fact is you are still a dark-skinned black man with dreadlocks.
Right. They all exist in a system that continues to privilege whiteness.
That's right.
A system that disparages blackness unless it can be commodified in some way. And a system in which we all bear the burden of a long, troubled history of race relations kept in place through violence.
It's a tough time, you know. It's a tough time, and I know there are some people who are tired of the conversation, but guess what? The conversations are only just beginning.
Indeed.
They are only just beginning. But what I really want for TNT is for us to really start having these conversations more publicly. I can't tell you how many times you would see a conversation of this nature happening. Most times dealing with like an international topic or issue. The other day there was the topic of who won. It was in Marvel. Who Marvel is casting as Storm, and you know people popping up to talk about, oh God, she black. What do you mean she not black enough? No, she's not. And here's why she's not. One, because of the fact that representation is important.
Indeed.
Representation is important. And yes, Storm, the idea of Storm might be a frivolous one, etc. But at the end of the day, when the comic was originally written, Storm was originally written as a dark-skinned African woman. She was almost patterned after Oya.
Yes.
She named Storm.
She named is Storm.
She named is Storm.
It's true.
Right? And Marvel has continuously whitewashed the character. And people have started speaking about it. It's not only that particular character. There's a whole smorgasbord of characters.
Remember Scarlett Johansson for Ghost in the Shell?
Look. You know, if we talk about
Too many examples.
Zoe Saldana and Nina Simone, which was just so gross in so many ways.
Yeah.
And the point is, it's because of the fact that many of our beautiful, brilliant, talented, light bright sisters continue to allow themselves to be used as a pawn because they won't speak on behalf of the voices that they are disenfranchising.
Exactly the point I want to make, because in those moments, our light brights should step up and say, you know, this is wrong, because. But again, because it's opportunity and they see a way to just forward their careers, they take it.
That's right.
Which is why Miss Saldana could come back in 2020 to say she's sorry.
Kiana, if you know what I wanted to tell she do with that apology, girlfriend, you literally went in blackface with a nose prosthetic and filmed for how many months? And then you come back years after the fact to say you now see the error of your ways?
And not just
after you were told
to portray someone as beloved as Nina Simone and beloved because of her black politics.
Thank you.
As she used to say herself, blackety, black politics.
Thank you. So girl, I just wanted to get a little bit of that out of our system. It's probably not going to be the only time we talk about colorism. We gonna come back to it because guess what? We dark skin, we black, and we have dreadlocks. It's a thing.
Yeah,
like,
this needs a lot of talk.
We probably gonna talk about
really
it.
Get this out
the system. You know, we haven't even touched what corporate Trinidad and Tobago does with blackness in advertising.
Yeah.
In our Trinbagonian landscape. You know, all the supposedly beautiful woe people.
Oh gosh, you ever heard the term McCann Brown?
Girl.
What does it even mean?
And it's not even McCann Brown, it's general advertising brown. That whole idea of if you're darker than a brown paperback. And this is not only a term, advertising brown and the brown paperback test is not only specific to Trinidad and Tobago. Those are also references I've also heard in the United States and the UK. So these are things that, I mean, we like to act like we are so different and our experience is so much more evolved because we're from the Caribbean and we're such a melting pot. We have the same shit going on.
Gosh.
That we need to, like, come to terms with. We have the same thing going on here that we need to come to terms with and stop skirting around the issue because corporate Trinidad and capitalist Trinidad will only continue to do what they do because we allow it. Because we allow it. So, all my beautiful sisters of skin, kin of all different hues, we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. And when it comes to colorism, there's a huge responsibility of my sisters of the lighter complexion to stand in the gap with your sisters of darker complexion. And I'm using sisters because of course I'm speaking from the experience of womanhood, and also too because we know that black women are exposed to a disproportionately greater amount of violence in all different ways, and we use violence in the terms of not just physical violence, but also in terms of how they are treated within intellectual, academic, and corporate spaces. So yeah, we'll come back to it, but for today, we get it out with system. Are we getting into remember when? Because immediate and historical context is imperative when framing the conversation. So, remember when Amanda wrote this amazing article and got published in a brilliant academic journal? I remember. It happened like last week.
It was just last week.
Yes, congratulations to you. We are very, very proud of you. And by we, I don't obviously just mean me, but I know that there are a lot of folks who our contemporaries and whatnot who are very, very proud of what you have accomplished, and to see your work published in, you know, this kind of journal with this held in this kind of esteem, it is a very big deal.
Yeah, I'm really surprised about it as well because I've been doing academic work for a while now. And this year was actually a really good year. So I have a number of publications also in the pipeline. This one was the Caribbean Journal that was founded in 1986. And one of the founding directors was Edward Kamau Brathwaite, from Barbados, who is an iconic Caribbean writer with texts such as The Arrivants to his credit, texts such as The History of the Voice, in which he speaks about the particular ways in which Caribbean people, because of our different contributions, because of the different influences, the ways in which we write and how differently that is, as opposed to someone from a European metropole. So when we sent this essay to the Caribbean writer, I knew that this was a big deal from since then. This was an essay that I co-authored with Yarula M.I. Wegner, who is a researcher from Frankfurt, Germany, and it deals with creating platforms within spaces of heteronormative leisure and making those spaces more accessible to queer youth, and looks at Carnival specifically as a platform for feminist and queer justice. So one of the things we deal with is just the fact that in the early movement of Carnival, there was a lot of transvestism, and there remains a lot of transvestism in Carnival. So every year at the Adam Smith Square, you could find male performers doing Dan Marin, Baby Doll, whatever. In the early movement of Carnival, all of these characters were primarily portrayed by men. By all characters, I mean the female masquerades, primarily portrayed by men, and yet, despite that, notwithstanding that, no positive representation of queer culture
within the Carnival setting.
Within Carnival, which of course just reflects the wider society's marginalization of queer culture. The largest scale on which queering in Carnival occurred ever was with Peter Minshall's The Dying Swan, and we all know the great
so beautiful.
Yeah. He should have won. He should have won.
Yeah, you're saying it in big.
He should have won.
She's saying it in big all year.
He should have won.
Love you, Jhawhan.
Thomas,
love you.
King of Carnival.
Yeah, that year. But I think that to many people in our hearts, he was a king.
Yeah.
In our hearts, he was a king. He was king.
In
my head, this will sound terrible, and I'm not disparaging the person who was crowned the king that year, because I know there's a lot of work that goes into creating a king of Carnival that the prize money could in no way really compensate for. So I'm not disparaging, but I can't remember who was crowned king.
Exactly.
But I do remember the Dying Swan.
Exactly. And one of the interesting parts of the discussion following that was just an awareness of how queer culture, LGBT culture, is reprimanded not just in wider society but within Carnival as well. And that year with Jhawhan being brushed to the side, and I mean he came third, which is still high, but we know he should have won.
Yeah, he should have won.
So we were just looking at queering in Carnival and different representations of queering since the first movements of Carnival to now.
But let me ask you, because girl, people have a dedication to being stupid. A lifelong dedication. There are people, you hear that whole idea of, the LGBTQ agenda and all this nonsense that people talk about, and be like, they don't have an agenda, they're just trying to live their life. Like, it's...
People just trying to live.
They're literally just trying to live. Like, stop it.
And in Carnival, they're just trying to play the man.
This is what I'm saying. So, how would you respond to somebody who is saying you are trying to superimpose the LGBTQ agenda within the Carnival? I mean, I know the answer to it because, as you've said, the queering and that transgenderism in terms of male characters playing female characters has always existed. But in terms of a modern day context, how would you respond to, stupid people who would say shit like that?
Right. So the people who say this, I would always ask the question, why is there such a great need to suppress it? If you have a problem with representation and your response to your problem with representation is suppression, then you really have a problem. And this is why it is necessary always, when you're in a circumstance like that, to always subvert it. So if you're in a situation when anything is being suppressed and you know it is being suppressed, and it's unjust suppression, your responsibility in such a situation is to subvert it. So in addition to making these observations and doing this research and producing this essay, in addition to that, it was imperative for us to also produce queering in Carnival. So in the same year of writing the article, we did the queer baby doll family.
Right, I remember that.
So we presented as two women with the doll child, which was lesbian family life. And because Yarula kept the beard, of course, we had the veils, but once people came closer, they could see that it was a man. To the point where observers were asking about it. One person asking if he does breastfeed the child. I mean, so we had like hilarious moments on the road, but moments within which we could see that the audience was really grappling.
They were thinking about it, yeah.
Sexuality.
And that's what Carnival for me is supposed to do in terms of, I mean, yes, there's a spectacle aspect of Carnival, but there's also the aspect of Carnival that is also supposed to be about commentary. It's supposed to be about forcing conversation and forcing people to think and grapple with their own, you know, the stereotypes that they hold on to, and ask yourself why, you know, if it is we at this point in, you know, the year of Joseph's stepson 2020, and we haven't gotten to the point of asking ourselves why. And this is all of us. Nobody is so evolved that we can't, that none of us have questions that we need to ask ourselves about our own perceptions of the world, a lot of which is probably skewed because of your own lived experiences. If you can't get to the point of asking yourself why, then you haven't evolved enough. You have more evolving to do.
One of the ironies is that Carnival is always touted as the celebration of freedom. But within this celebration of freedom, there's such a commitment to excluding certain people.
Agreed.
And one of the groups, of course, heavily marginalized within the Carnival space has been queer persons of queer identification.
You are so right. You are absolutely right. And the strange thing is, it's not even, it's an unspoken exclusion, whereas there's a commitment to almost a spoken exclusion in terms of going back to colorism, in terms of colorism within the Carnival space, and certain Carnival bands, etc., making no bones about the fact that that their acceptance and registration of folks are along a certain color spectrum, so to speak. When it comes to sexuality and gender identification, it's unspoken, and it's not something people will actively come out and talk about, but we know that it's there. We know that there are certain bands that people who don't identify as cisgender would be more comfortable playing in as opposed to other bands, and these are conversations that we're not having. Why is that?
Well, this is a really good point that you make, because the truth is, queer bodies, queer people have always been involved in Carnival, involved as masqueraders, involved in terms of producing masks, band leaders, Carnival costume designers, etc. So queer bodies have always been present in Carnival, but we distinguish between the presence of queer bodies and the positive representation of queer culture, which is different. So if we go back to the example of the dying swan, it wasn't just that Peter Minshall did the dying swan. He did Ras Nijinsky in drag.
He really did. The dying swan. People leave out that top part, you know.
Understand? He was clear. This is a queer performance. I don't want any kind of doubt. I don't want any kind of mistake.
I'm telling you what it is.
I'm telling you. You could see Peter Minshall.
Literally, I'm telling you
right?
what it is.
The dying swan. Ras Nijinsky in drag as Pablo.
But Amanda, I'm so glad that you are one of the voices leading these conversations, and sometimes I feel like this kind of conversation, we are behind the rest of the world a little bit in having a certain comfort level in having these kinds of conversations publicly.
Well, we have a very conservative society, you know.
We do. A conservative society that's rooted in conventional religion and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's a strange kind of conservatism because we have Carnival culture. That seems to be like the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
So it's always strange to see how heavily we repress certain cultures.
How we pick and choose what it is we want to deal with.
Exactly.
But this is brilliant. We congratulate you again. And I want to invite you to read a little excerpt, your favorite excerpt from your article.
So the You Are Worthy Baby Doll Family. You Are Worthy is the title we gave to the performance of the queer baby doll family. The You Are Worthy Baby Doll Family was not the first time queer culture was the highlight of a carnival masquerade in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2016, veteran carnival artist Peter Minshall presented The Dying Swan with performer Jhawhan Thomas as Ras Nijinsky in drag as Pavlova. The Dying Swan entered the Queen's Park Savannah stage in the King and Queens competition. The masquerade was styled majestically in tall feathers and walked on stilts that were crafted to resemble the legs and shoes of a ballerina. Minshall combined these elements and presented a non-gender conforming character in Trinidad and Tobago's carnival that did neither mock nor otherwise negatively represent marginalized cultures of gender and sexuality. It was instead a positive and sophisticated presentation of queer culture. Of course, transvestism was part of Trinidad's carnival from early on, and queer-identified people surely have always been present in this celebration, yet queer culture had not been openly affirmed and celebrated. You Are Worthy continued this intervention in its combination of traditional mass with queer family life. The performance highlighted the legitimacy, inclusion, and visibility of queer culture in Trinidad and Tobago's carnival.
She's a writer, y'all. She writes things. So let people know the exact name of the journal, and if they are that way inclined and they really want to read the entire article, where they can access it.
This is volume 34 of The Caribbean Writer. The article is called Queer Baby Doll Family in Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival, and you could find the link to purchase on their website. It's thecaribbeanwriter.org. And you could purchase either an electronic or a hard copy of the journal.
Great, and we will put the link below the podcast so you can get in if you're that way inclined. But again, congratulations, Amanda. We are very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
So there you go. That's our amended version of Remember When. But I really found that this was an important moment to commemorate. And
I think it was a good remember when, now that I think about it, because we weren't just remembering that my article was published, my co-authored essay was published, but also we remembered so much about Carnival. We remembered The Dying Swan.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
Good job. Getting into Answer That. And we have all reason to be particularly petty because we have a question. It's a very simple question, you know. And my very simple question goes a little something like this. Dear Khadija, I need to take a pause. This episode's winner of the race baiting Olympics on good old social media, concerning stability of slavery and the uncertainty of freedom. That's the quote that she used. What exactly were you hoping to achieve with this Facebook post? Amanda, care to give us some context?
Well, people came out immediately in defense of Khadija. One person referenced Marcus Aurelius. Saying that this is where the statement originally came from, but having lifted it out of that context, it took on different meaning, negative meaning, and they were wondering exactly what was Khadija's intention. And so we asked the question, you know,
what you mean?
What you mean? But this, of course, is not the first time we've had these type of antics from Miss Amin. This is the same Khadija from the UNC Hall of Fame. Right?
The one who
race baiting.
The one who refused to, who abstained when it was time to vote on the child marriage bill. I always like to throw that in because for me, like, you can't really tell me nothing after that.
What I think is really unfortunate about Khadija, she's a very beautiful woman. Part of the criticism always levied against her is that she's not intelligent. The pretty and dumb trope is always thrown at her.
Except she never comes across as dumb to me. She's purposeful.
This is it.
She is very, very purposeful. Like, Khadijah posted this floating quote, because that's what it felt like. It's just floating there. But we all immediately knew the context in which she posted this quote. Otherwise, why post it?
Yeah.
You understand? This, and as we were having a conversation prior where you were saying, you know that whole thing about if you say something enough, eventually there will be people who eventually buy into it as being fact and as being true. So this equation of people who have been out of Trinidad and Tobago and have been waiting to be repatriated in the middle of a goddamn global pandemic, we keep equating them being out of Trinidad and Tobago and having to wait to be repatriated to slavery.
You know, just before election 2020, Kamla Persad-Bissessar made the same comparison.
This is it. The only thing Khadijah has done this time is that she has crafted it, padded it up nicely inside, hidden inside of the context of this quote. You understand? And I feel like you're peeing in my face and calling it rain, man.
And you know, what's really tragic is the issue of repatriation to Trinidad and Tobago could be dealt with. Like, that's a worthy discussion to have. But why? Why is there this fetishization with slavery? Gosh, could we just...
Low-hanging fruit.
I mean...
Low-hanging fruit. So, I mean, we don't want to impose what we think the goodly lady meant, although we just did because, let's be honest. But very simply, you know, last week, the last episode, we had good old Vandana. This week, we have,
Khadijah.
You know, Vandana handing the baton to Khadijah.
Yeah.
And all we want to know, girlfriend, is concerning the stability of slavery and the uncertainty of freedom. That quote that you posted on Facebook and then swiftly took down, but we all screenshotted because we know your shenanigans. We say, hey, let me just screenshot it just in case you decide to delete it. Concerning that Facebook post, my dear, what exactly were you hoping to achieve? You think you could answer that for us? Somebody sent her a message on Facebook.
I like the image of them passing the baton because it makes me wonder if it's like a really what's at the end of this race.
Yeah, that's why I said
what are the prizes? How are they benefiting?
The winner of the race baiting Olympics for this episode, because I cannot see it as anything but that. I really can't. All right. So when we come back, we're gonna wrap things up. But before we do, we're gonna talk about how we're spending our money, and this is where this particular episode gets very, very PG, not PG, G-rated. So we talking how we spending we money, yes, before we wrap things up. So this week we are celebrating a little miss. She is only 5 years old and she is well on the way to becoming a full-fledged superstar. She loves lots of things. She loves music, she loves to dance, and most importantly, she loves to read. And she is now a full-fledged author. So we have Miss Amanda, who is published and whatnot, who knows. Maybe some years from now, we will hear that Corinne Anaya Clark is also published.
Corinne is already published.
In an academic journal, I was going to say, but yes, she is published. She's a whole published author, right? With one book under her belt, and I think there's another book in the works.
Yeah.
So Ms. Corinne Anaya Clark, 5-year-old daughter of her fabulous parents, Dion Batiste Clark and Ron Clark, we just want to highlight her work. She's got a brand new book, and there are a couple articles. I'm going to put the link to the article from the Newsday. Well, actually, she's not even 5 yet. She's 4.
She's just 4.
She's 4. I was thinking she's 5 because she started big school. Listen, Corinne has followers on social media. Corinne is doing numbers, okay? She has a firm fan base, and I am not ashamed to say I'm a hardcore member of the Corinne fan base, or as her mommy calls her, Contrary Mary. I am a full member of the fan base. So they posted pictures of her in her school uniform, and I thought it was because, okay, well, she go in big school, so she's 5, she's 4. She's 4 years old. So there's an article that was published I want to say 2 or 3 weekends ago in the Newsday that talks about her writing exploits. And you can also find her on Facebook at Corinne A. Clark. That's her Facebook page. Play with her. Corinne Anaya. Well, she's Corinne Anaya Clark, but you can find her on Facebook at Corinne A. Clark. So feel free to subscribe. Oh, she's Corinne Anaya Clark. Yes, we are looking at the page right about now. So, what is the name of the book?
Chronicles of Corinne, 7 Days of Fun.
There you go. The book is, she received the box of her printed copies a day or 2 ago. So if you are interested in purchasing a copy for your little one, you want it autographed, etc., feel free to check out Corinne Anaya Clark on Facebook, send them a message, or you can email author Corinne Clark at gmail.com, and little Miss Corinne and her mommy and her daddy will respond to you, and they will organize to get your possibly autographed copy to you. And that this week is a very, very worthy way to spend we money celebrating this little princess. She is a beautiful dark-skinned African girl out here being a full-fledged superstar. Literally.
I'm very happy to amplify Corinne today being World Literacy Day.
Yes, today
September
is
8th.
Yeah, that's the day that we pre-recorded. Today is World Literacy Day. So I'm glad that all of these stars aligned that we were able to highlight it today. All right, Ms. Manda May.
Hey.
That's a wrap, you know.
It's a wrap.
That is a wrap. We talk about plenty of things
It's a
today.
Bantu Knots.
I will not have you. Could you please leave Lori Bell Adkins out of our thing, please?
It's a Bantu Knot.
It's a Bantu Knot. That's how we
like
knot it up this week. Thank you so much.
To be black, they're tying up themselves in Bantu Knots.
It works. It works. Yeah. All right. So feel free, send us your comments. We're always happy to hear from you guys. And we'll meet you back here in about 2 weeks. For Rock the Boat 868, the podcast.